Hello, everybody. I'm Jean Ladding. Do you know people who are afraid to speak up in the workplace or any place for that matter? You're about to meet Dan Oestreich, who is about to shed light on what to say to someone, especially people in the workplace, yet you are afraid to say it. Dan wrote 2 books about this topic. The first is Drive Fear Out of the Workplace, and the second is called The Courageous Messenger. He graduated from Yale University as an undergrad and has a master's in counseling from the University of Colorado. He now shares his knowledge and skills as a coach, facilitator, trainer. I was really excited when I found out about the Courageous Messenger and knew I wanted him to be on this podcast. He accepted, and here he is. Hello, Dan.
Hello, Jean. It's so nice to be here.
I am so delighted you accepted the invite. I remember seeing the cover of your book, Driving the Fear Out of the Workplace, thinking, oh no, that's not possible. That's not possible. So then I saw you did The Courageous Messenger.
Yes.
And so I'd like you to talk about both.
Okay. Well, so there I was working in a city government in what was the personnel department. This was before the term human resources even was popular. And the city got sued in a sexual harassment case. I was very interested in training, found a trainer named Kathy Ryan, and together we started training managers on sexual harassment in the workplace and how to avoid it and what to do about it and how to build better relationships with staff so you would hear about it. At about the same time, I happened to read an article called Skilled Incompetence.
Yes.
Skilled Incompetence.
Chris
Argyris, and he mentioned the term undiscussables.
Love it.
Yeah, so Kathleen and I decided sometime after our work together at the city that we would write a book about undiscussables and how to overcome them. And so we interviewed 260 people in 22 organizations and all different kinds of organizations and all different kinds of jobs and people. And we, from that, developed a kind of, well, not only a framework for thinking about it, but a real sensitivity to the issues that people were dealing with. So that's kind of where this whole process of speaking up began. It's what is it that people might be talking about in the hallways, cafeterias, out in the parking lot that they would not bring to people who could actually do something about the problems they were most concerned with.
All right. So let's go back to the beginning, the sexual harassment.
Yes.
You're probably aware that the research says that sexual harassment training often backfires.
Yeah.
Because the guys say, oh, if this is what's going to happen, I'm not going to ever report it.
Yeah, that's right. You're right.
Did you have any of that experience?
We didn't. The program that Kathleen set up was really thorough. And there was a lot of follow through. It was some initial training, but then a lot of discussions and training internal leaders in every department to be sensitive to the issues and serve as advocates. So it was a different experience. And I think the one other thing that was going on was that because the city had been sued and it was publicized broadly, there was a financial fee, and it was a complicated case that not only involved a supervisor and employee, but the attitudes of staff after this had all gone down that were in play. So I think we did pretty good on that score. What I will tell you is that as an entrance to the training profession, standing up in front of 25 different groups of supervisors was amazing. And all the negative attitudes, all the bad beliefs, all the crazy stuff was right there in our face. And I had to learn to respond to that and go right into it and not shirk a responsibility to deal with the way the people felt and believed at that time.
So what I suspect then is y'all did extensive training with follow through over a period of time and
Yes.
not a 1/2 hour or hour
Oh,
thou
no.
shalt not
Oh,
training.
yeah.
Yeah,
The
those are
training,
the trainings that backfire. I want to be right.
clear about that. Yeah.
Yes, the
And
one shot backfire.
yeah, well, uh, the short term, half an hour thing, I think is just enough to raise people's prejudices around this topic and stereotypes,
Yes.
and not enough to begin to actually address what needed to be addressed. So without going into a lot of detail, I will say that that training was at least a day long for supervisors, and there was lots of follow-up for everybody, and lots of endorsement from top leadership,
Oh,
which
that's
was,
critical.
yeah, was critical, and also a vision, which I think is very critical around this stuff, a vision of the kind of relationships we ought to have in the workplace. And that was really meaningful.
Okay, so you said all the junk. You said that, you
Yeah.
had to stand up and face all the negativity and all.
Yeah.
Can you make that real concrete? And because I'm sure it hasn't changed since then.
Too much. Well, people would ask questions. For example, one I remember because it was meant to be funny but wasn't funny at all, is we were talking about dress codes and should a supervisor intervene if a person was not following that dress code. And so one of the supervisors in the room, he looked at me and he said, are you saying that, for example, if an attractive woman looks too buttoned up, I should tell her to unbutton her blouse? I mean, in a group of 20 supervisors, it's hard to imagine anybody going there. So, what I had to do was, instead of staying where I was at the front of a classroom environment, actually walk up to this guy to have a dialogue about it. And we did have a little dialogue about it. What? Oh, I
I mean,
don't
just make it
remember
up
very much.
now. If
I
it
don't
happened now.
remember very much, but it was probably, because this is a long, long time ago now, but I think I probably said, I don't think that's right. And I think you know it.
Whoa. So you probably went there and
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
we don't do this.
We don't do this. I mean, I remember another time because we walked through a vision for the way relationships should be in city government. We walked through that. And somebody highly placed in the organization raised his hands and he says, Dan, is this the vision for the city that you got from the city manager? Or is this just your vision?
Just what? Yours?
Your vision, yeah, because that would have discredited, discounted. And the fact was, we had sat down with the city manager at the time and said, this is what we want to share. This is the vision that we think is in the right direction. And he added some things to it and it was great. So that was an easy one to reply to.
Okay. So what's the vision? With fast forward to 2023,
Yeah.
because I can't imagine it's going to be too much different now than it was
Yeah.
20 years ago or 40 years ago, or what have you. What's the vision that people should be aiming for?
Well, I'll tell you, the word I like these days is dignity, is that we should be treating each other in a way that reinforces dignity of whoever you are. There's a wonderful book that I think actually, in some ways, extends, supersedes Driving Fear Out of the Workplace, by a woman named Donna Hicks, who did work around the world in reconciliation with Desmond Tutu. And she identifies in very straightforward, simple terms, what's dignity look like? And what are the temptations that take us away from dignity in our relationship building work?
What are
And
the temptations?
let me get the book here. I'll
Okay.
tell you.
All
And
right.
and what's interesting about the temptations that she relates is that when you talk about what does dignity look like, almost everybody agrees, oh yeah, that's what we already do. But when you get to the
Yeah, right.
temptations, when you get to the temptations, they go, oh no, that isn't really yet. her 10 temptations to violate dignity are taking the bait, saving face, shirking responsibility, seeking false dignity, which is about just looking for approval, seeking false security. So if you feel like you have a relationship, that's enough. Avoiding conflict, being a victim, resisting feedback, blaming and shaming others to deflect your own guilt, engaging in false intimacy and demeaning gossip. Those are the 10.
Got it.
Yeah. It's a beautiful list. I've used this book a number of times in groups that I've worked with, and everybody adores it. I mean, it's just such a clear, succinct, right on statement. Do you want to hear what the 10 characterizations of dignity are? I think they're cool. The first is acceptance of identity, accepting the identity of other people. The second is inclusion. The third is safety. The fourth is acknowledgement, acknowledging people. The fifth is recognition, validating other people for their talents, hard work, and so forth. Fairness, giving people the benefit of the doubt. Understanding, working to understand. Independence, encouraging people to act on their own behalf. And accountability. So if you haven't got this one, I really encourage you to get it. It's again by Donna Hicks, and the subtitle is its essential role in resolving conflict.
It's essential. Is the name of the book Dignity?
Dignity, its essential role in resolving conflict.
Wow.
Yeah. It was written in 2011. She has a follow-up book, Leading with Dignity, but I always encourage people to get this one first and then get that one. Yeah.
Okay, so
that was the vision.
yes. So you've laid out the vision. So the vision is to treat each other with dignity. So I want to go to one aspect that she mentioned, and that is identity. Let's talk about identity, because I was surprised that she had that as the first one. Yes. You know, there is a lot of debate now about the role of identity in the workplace, and should we get rid of all identities and just see each other colorblind? We don't know, we're all just the human race.
Yeah.
What does she mean about identity, and how do you interpret it?
Well, I think, and I haven't talked to her, so I don't know, but what I do believe is that her sense of the importance of identity and its relationship to conflict is, unless you feel accepted, deeply accepted for the identity that you have, or that you own, that you identify with, you're not going to get very far in building dignity into a relationship. It's just a crucial element.
That gave me goosebumps. That is totally cool. If I think of identity in terms of resolving conflict, of course, I have to, who I define myself as being has to be accepted. That's right.
That's right. So to me, that's just a really powerful part. And you think of somebody who was involved in reconciliation work around the world, and thinking about the tough situations where there's been violence in relationships over time, and all these differences that collude to create enormous amounts of mistrust and then violence, how could you possibly get to any kind of resolution without acceptance of identity? I just don't think it's possible.
Oh, this is fabulous. I had never ever put the two
Yeah,
together like that.
yeah. So, you know, there's a poem that I kind of live by. And if you're willing, I will share the first verse
I'm
and,
ready.
and with you. Let me just get it up in front of me. It's called A Ritual to Read to Each Other by William Stafford. If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others may prevail in the world, and following the wrong God home, we may miss our star.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah. The rest of
Read
the
it one
poem
more
is
time.
equally.
Read it one more time
Yes.
so we can absorb it.
If you don't know the kind of person I am, and I don't know the kind of person you are, a pattern that others made may prevail in the world. And following the wrong God home, we may miss our star.
Wow.
I, to me, that's kind of the core here of a lot of what we're talking about when we're talking about creating a workplace where people really can thrive, is finding our star. And we can't do that unless we know, you know, I need to know you, you need to know me. And a big part of that is the acceptance of identity and doing all those other things that Donna Hicks talked about, and avoiding all those temptations that we run into every day. I mean, I can tell you that so many times when I've worked with individuals or groups and I read the list of temptations, people go, oh yeah, taking the bait. I do that all the time.
Okay, so this is a long-lived question I'm about to ask you. Ever since
Yeah,
I saw the cover of your book,
yeah,
is it possible to drive the fear out of the workplace?
yeah, it's such a great question. It's a wonderful question. It's the sort of question I think you live your whole life trying to answer.
That's why I said it's been long. I can't even, I am so delighted I get the chance to ask the author of the book this question that I've held in my
Yeah.
head since I first saw the cover decades ago.
Yeah, is it even possible? And the title of the book, you know, comes from work by a kind of a guru in the uh, time of the quality movement, W. Edwards Deming, who had
Yeah.
different uh, kind of maxims to change management. And one of them was drive out fear.
Oh, that's right. It was Deming did say that.
Yeah, yes. And at the time that we were writing that book, it was very popular, and we wanted to align our organization development work and coaching work with what Deming was saying. If I had to rename the book today,
Thank you. That was my question.
it would be Driving Mistrust Out of the Workplace or Building Trust in the Workplace. Mistrust is actually, I think, closer to the actual thing we're working with. Mistrust is a form of fear. There's no question about that. But I like mistrust because I think it's based so heavily on negative beliefs and stereotypes about other people. It's easier to relate those negative stereotypes and how they affect people to mistrust than fear outright, Jean. I mean, that's my personal view of
Okay.
how that works.
Okay. So let's keep going with this. Because
Okay.
I wonder if you can have trust in the workplace.
Yeah. It's
Knowing that I can be fired, knowing that the business can drop,
yeah.
lose clients, and I can be let go.
Yeah.
What does trust mean anyway?
Yes. And You know, I talked to Amy Edmondson, who created the term psychological safety.
Right.
She prefers that title because mistrust has just too many layers to it. You know, am I trusting in external conditions like you're talking about to protect my job? You know, do I trust my supervisor? Do I trust my coworkers? It's just a whole lot of different stuff. But I like trust. I like working with it, even though it's ambiguous. And the answer to that is some of it we can overcome. Can we overcome every speck of mistrust? Probably not, because life is the way it is. And external conditions are the way they are. We probably can't get rid of every bit of it, but we can sure as heck work on our relationships so that we don't have mistrust clouding what's going on. And by clouding, I mean we rely on our negative beliefs about other people to justify our competition with one another, our need for superiority, our, you know, all those things that are a salve for feeling insecure.
Okay, you know, as I was thinking, I'm a researcher, and so I know the opposite of hot is not cold. The opposite of hot is not hot, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So I'm listening, debating in my head, I'm thinking, the absence of mistrust, the opposite of that is not trust.
no, it isn't.
So there's
So
mistrust
it's a
and then
neutral
there's the
zone.
absence of, yes, it's a neutral thing. And
Yeah,
I can live more easily with overcoming mistrust than
yeah,
I can with enabling trust,
yeah,
if
yeah.
that makes any sense.
Well, you know, here's what I've noticed in real terms. If I'm working with somebody who's got a negative belief about another person, coworker, boss, you know, somebody who reports to them, if I can help that person uh, challenge their belief, like, do you in fact really know this?
Right,
How do you know it? And what's the evidence?
right.
Can I get to this neutral place? And if you know, if a person begins to ask themselves that, things can begin to change radically.
Right.
I might decide to build a bridge. You know, one of the aspects of that is in challenging is creating what somebody called kind of a workable position in being with another person. If I hold on to my negative beliefs about other people without much evidence of that, I'm in an unworkable place. I cannot create a relationship.
And then I'm into confirmation bias.
That's right.
So that
Exactly.
everything they do confirms that I
Confirms.
shouldn't have trusted them in the first place.
That's right. That's right. But if you can move to a more neutral place, ask what other explanations might there be for this behavior,
Right.
you know, and that's, you know, all by itself can be an enormous challenge for us because we love our belief systems. We just adore them
Yes.
and they're very, very hard.
One of my clients one time was trying to explain to me why she was upset with her boss and thought that he was a jerk. And then she said, but I can't tell you. I said, why? She said, because you're just going to ask me what's the evidence. And I don't have any evidence. I'm just,
There you go.
I said,
There you
I said, you're working hard to hang on to it. She says, yes, you're going to ask me what's the evidence. And I don't have any evidence.
go. Right. And then we can use that, I think, to kind of begin to open up the issue of what does it mean to speak up across that boundary where there is not a lot of trust. And that's very problematic. I think that's what Kathleen and I and her husband George did with Courageous Messenger, is try to figure out a way for people to think about speaking up without there being necessarily a high trust relationship to begin with.
Whoa. So, okay, I was just, torn. I was about to, let's hold that. Let me do what I was
Okay,
about to
all
do.
right, yeah.
This is so cool. I don't want to lose that. Say that again, because I don't want to lose it.
Well, I think that what we authors did with Courageous Messenger is try to figure out a way to help people feel more comfortable speaking up without there already being a very supportive, trust-based relationship.
Okay, there we go. So let's hang on to that.
Yeah.
And I now want to do a detour and ask you, why did you get into all of this in the first place?
Well, you know, I think in my life over time, because of my origins and where I come from, there were some strong threads of alienation, would be the word I would use, feeling different from other people.
Be real concrete. You were this and they were that.
Yeah, I mean, here's, if I take it all the way back to original stuff, in my family, I was the kid who loved poetry, still do, and um, enjoyed being in nature just because it was nature. And that didn't really fit very well in the rural family that I was part of. And the other piece of it is that my dad was native German. He escaped from Germany during the rise of Hitler and was a refugee in Europe for a long time before coming to the United States. But I was aware from a very early age that his connections with other people were different. My dad wasn't like other dads. He didn't know about American sports. He didn't have close friends. He was a very strong, very dutiful, kind guy, but he was different. And I wondered about that difference and how much of that is kind of like your inheritance. And because the story had to do with, you mentioned the Third Reich as we were talking earlier, right? So there was something in there about, how different am I? And how come I have these different interests and all of that? I mean, when I was an adult, I began to have dreams about being chased by the Nazis.
Wow. Well, okay.
Yeah,
Are you Jewish? Is he Jewish? What do you mean he is?
no, no.
Well, how does he, if he's German born, what does escape mean? He
Escape means you walk across the border when you're 18 years old, past a sleeping guard into Czechoslovakia, and then spend the next several years as a refugee before getting sponsored into the United States by some friendly people.
Wow. So why did he want to get out? Why
Well,
wasn't he a Nazi?
I'm sorry?
Why didn't he become a Nazi? Why
He
did he
wasn't a Nazi. He wasn't a Nazi at all. He was escaping Nazism. He was escaping the threat of having to join the German army. And also because politically, his group was targeted by the Nazis and they were mean and they would come around and interrogate and intimidate families in a way that was very destructive and very, very scary for people.
What was the name of his group that the Nazis were after them?
I don't know. I don't
Okay.
really know.
But he was in some subculture in Germany
That's right. Yeah.
that the Nazis came after or targeted.
Yes. Targeted, one of many.
And he thought that he was afraid that he might be recruited into the gang.
That's forced into the gang, and
Forced.
the other is that his family could be targeted, brothers and sisters and parents. And so when he left, he did not tell anyone except some folks on the other side of town where he was going. So he just disappeared so that they could never be interrogated and have to keep a secret of some kind.
Wow. So you grew up with this history.
That's right. I grew up with that story, see? And so there was a sense of, I'm not like these other kids. This story lingers in the background, and I'm different. I'm shy. I was incredibly shy. And that whole theme of shyness and difference just carried all through until I was in college. I was a senior at Yale College, and I woke up one day and said to myself, I don't yet know how to talk to other people.
Wow.
So what did I do? I
Yeah.
went to school to become a counselor. I mean, it's
Of
just
course.
ironic. Of
I'm a
course,
social worker. I taught social workers, wounded healers.
yeah, that's right. So that whole issue of speaking and connecting and building relationships, I mean, for me, it wasn't just about talking to other people. What the implication there was is, how do you build a relationship of trust? How do you cross those boundaries? How do you get out of your own way? So,
Well, I kept thinking we need to talk about him first before we go into Courageous Messenger. Now I see why. This is absolutely, we absolutely needed to have this background. Courageous Messenger is about speaking up in
right.
the absence of complete trust.
Yes,
You had to learn to do that.
yes.
How do you do that?
Okay. So there's the critical question about, you have to know that that's a direction for your own growth, I think, at some level, at least for many people. Two
Well,
parts.
I think that's important. You have to choose growth. You know,
Yeah,
I have a friend who said, who used to say, she no longer says this, I don't want to change.
yeah. Well,
So
then
you have to choose.
you're who you are, and there you go.
That's it. Okay, so go ahead.
Well, I was just going to relate, in addition to that, I had a very good boss when I was at the city of Bellevue, where I worked for many years, where we did the sexual harassment prevention work. And he was, he was very open. And some of the things that I learned from him is, he was quite clear that you shouldn't be in a formal leadership role unless you can get feedback from other people. So that
Whoa.
was one piece. And the growth piece was, from him, was sometimes you just have to consciously choose pain. If you want to learn, if you want to grow, you have to do some things that won't, it's not uncomfortable, it's painful.
You are speaking my language.
But yeah, so there you are. So the two parts here. One part is deciding to cross that border at a particular time with a particular person about some particular issue. So you have to decide that. That's the first thing, is just deciding to speak up. The second thing is, how am I going to approach this? What are the skills involved in the actual conversation?
Okay, let's make this very tangible. Just make up any situation, yours, one of your clients, family, or whoever. Make up
Yeah.
a situation and talk us through that person.
Well, let's see. I have a client who is a really wonderful, warm, smart guy with an Asian background. And what he would love to talk about with his boss is his career development and growth. Very honest thing about, you've made promises about promotion. What's happening with that? Where am I really? And he absolutely wants to belong and wants to fit in and wants to cross that boundary. But he has a very hard time choosing to do that, because the movie in his head, as he sees that roll out, is not one that he feels he's capable of yet. So my client he's a really wonderful, warm, smart guy, and with an Asian background. And he wants to talk to his boss about his own career development and growth. There's been lots of implications that he is going to move up in the organization, but no detail, no continuing conversation. So what there is actually one of the elements of fear that Kathleen and I wrote about way back when,
Yes.
which is ambiguity. It's not that he's being treated harshly, he's just not getting any answers. He's
That's
not getting any information. And this then becomes a prime opportunity to project mistrust into the relationship.
Yes, they're stringing me along.
Yeah. So he is dealing with that. And as he's dealing with that, of course, he comes right up against his own conditioning, meaning what are the messages he's inherited that he's operating with today? And those messages are, be really careful. Be really careful about sharing anything here. You never know what could happen. Are there people that look like you in this organization? If not, you know, you're going to have to be extra special careful about what you say and do.
And there's that Asian saying, the nail that sticks up gets hammered down.
That's right. And all that stuff about model minority, all of which we've talked through. And so he's got that. And, you know, when you have it, it's not like you can just say, well, I'm going to dispense with all that conditioning. Now I'm going to go forward. You really have to put some time into thinking about how do I get past that? And we're not there yet. But what we are doing is working together to help him visualize a conversation he could have. And how would he do that? So rehearsing that very carefully, knowing what words he wants to say, what words he doesn't want to say, being open and relaxed, not tense, not jammed up.
Right.
Which is, you know, always something I think people are nervous about, is like, I'll get there and I'll panic and something will go wrong. And
right.
And although we haven't started down this road, I want to work with him on what his contingency plan is. So he has the conversation, doesn't go well the first time. What now? And
Okay,
how
so
are you going to work?
Okay, so you've gotten him to the point he's in the process of
Yeah.
deciding
Yes.
to even have the conversation. So what would you advise him? How would you work with him on what to actually say? Because I have clients in the same situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a very common situation.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is to be tactful, to tactfully enter the conversation, but then be quite direct about it. So, Bill, a made-up name here. Bill, I want to talk to you about career development. We've had some conversations in the past, but I need to know where I stand now. And to be really quite direct about identifying what that conversation is, and expecting that there will likely be a defensive reaction on the other side that might shut it down, and being able to listen and empathize and repeat what's being said, and then to continue in a nice way. And what you might include in that is what your real motivation is. The reason I want to talk about this is, and being able to talk about that reason.
What would be a reason?
I believe in the work that we're doing here. I've put in many, many, many hours, as you know. I feel that I deserve a clear answer on where I stand.
I'm so glad you say I deserve a clear answer versus I deserve a promotion.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's, you know,
yeah,
it's part of it. And, you know, I think that, and then you got to think about this as not, I came, I told you, you didn't give me what I wanted, and I dumped and ran. Right. Versus, let's have a dialogue about this. Let's just let down our hair just a little bit here to talk about what's the truth, what's really happening here.
So the elements of a courageous messenger, as I'm hearing it, is the decision to even engage in the conversation.
Yes.
The willingness to not be namby-pamby about it, so that you're quite direct. The willingness to listen, reflect, repeat. So it's not a one-way conversation. The other person, you're allowing for the other person to respond. And I don't want to say exit strategy, but what if it doesn't go the way you want?
Right.
What's your default backup plan?
Right. Which might be, in this case, simply another conversation at a later time. It might be really focusing on whether I'm going to ever get what I want from this organization and making a choice about whether I should leave or stay. In this case, this is somebody who has a phenomenal future ahead. and can go any number of places, although he might not see that quite yet.
So in the prep for this conversation, assuming the willingness, do you advise him to set up an appointment ahead of time, to send paper?
Really.
Not paper. This is the land of email,
Right.
a digital age. But what's the prep for that?
Well, for sure, setting a time with him alone would be really important. Don't try to do this kind of stuff in a group, but to make this a private, confidential, more comfortable conversation, picking a good time, picking a good place. Do you believe you can do this over Zoom in a remote way, or would this be better over a cup of coffee or in an office? You know, those are all choices that I think we make, and it's about what you believe about your receiver.
Right.
You know, what is that person's communication style? What do they like? What works for them? It's kind of, how do I land in their airport?
And would you advise him to let the guy know ahead of time what this meeting is about, or spring it on it?
No, let them know in advance, but don't allow too much time between the letting know and the actual conversation.
Okay, hang on a minute. I got something in my throat. Okay, I'm back.
Okay. So I think that the not too much time is because it may create some tension for the other person.
It will.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you don't want to have it all at once. You want to give them a chance to think through it, and also for yourself to continue to get ready. But it's important to give people a little warning about what you want to talk about. Otherwise, they really are caught off guard. And then you may simply get a defensive reaction. And then you have to start over. So,
okay, what does start over look like?
Start over might be let some time go by, try it again another time. And that again, super variable, Gene. I mean, there's no one right answer to what that is, depending on how the other person responds and what you know of them. Again, there's kind of an issue of evidence here. If the person has a history of repercussions, it may go all the way back to rethinking, do I want to try this at all? To, oh, I just caught Bill at a bad time. Let's do this tomorrow. And set up some time in a different way.
That's wonderful. So what are the scary things that people, you wrote the book, The Courageous Messenger. What examples of scary things? One is asking about, am I even in the running for promotion?
Yes.
One of them.
Well, when you look at, I mean, when we talked to so many people before writing Driving Fear Out of the Workplace, we learned a lot about what those undiscussables were. Almost half of them had to do with management practice of some kind. The big taboo here is talking to managers about management systems, actions, decisions, anything that could come back to that person. And the largest area within that sort of global 50% was how my immediate boss treats me. So that's a big source of undiscussability. If I feel that you don't understand me, you're putting me down, you're treating me in a weird way, for whatever reason, all of that is probably the toughest stuff to work with. And what people said was, and because we asked them, why are you scared to talk about this stuff? And the two main answers that came up is fear of repercussions. And the second thing was, it wouldn't do any good.
I always, it wouldn't do any good. Why should I bother?
Why bother? Yeah. And interestingly, the repercussions that we heard about with that sample, the number one thing was not, I'll get fired. It was, I'll lose credibility. And if I lose credibility, it'll affect my career and my capacity to survive, succeed here over time. And then, like, number 3 or 4 down the list is, if there's a riff, I'll be gone. So
fired is not what I hear either. What I
Yeah.
hear is they won't give me this opportunity. They'll give it to favorite child Bill.
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. The number one issue that I heard as I was doing interviews is people being afraid of being labeled. You know, we work off stereotypes. This is more of the negative assumption stuff. And the number one, I bet you can guess the number one stereotype that people are worried about if they speak up and it's not successful. I'll be seen as a
Troublemaker.
You got it. We all know that word. That is the line of the taboo. Troublemaker. Yeah. So that's how conformity happens. That's how people are shut down and shut up, is the fear that will be labeled in that way. And there are other labels in there. Not a team player, for example, is another popular one.
And then if you throw ethnicity or gender
That's
there,
into that.
you know, I'll be known, if I'm a woman, I'll be known as the B word.
That's right. Exactly. And those negative belief systems which reduce people and dehumanize them are exactly what's in the way.
So where does the courage to speak up come from?
That's a wonderful question. Some people that we talk to have been through very difficult experiences. I mean, I remember a Vietnam vet who said once you've been out on the firing line and you've got people shooting at you, after that, somebody telling you you can't ask for a raise or make a suggestion for improvement or even being berated by the CEO, it's just not going to make any difference because you've already been survived being shot at. But and then I think there are people who just naturally feel like their honesty is acceptable just as it is, and they're willing to go forward.
Yeah. Back to the Vietnam vet.
Yeah.
When I was pre-tenure, a faculty member told me, Jean, I contradicted a senior faculty member. Jean, you shouldn't do that. You know you're up for tenure. And I said, look, if I can survive the segregated South, I can be in an institution of higher learning and be told and speak my mind. Otherwise, this place doesn't deserve to be called an institution of higher learning.
That's right.
I survived the South, I can survive.
That's right. That's good. That's good. I think it's a kind of a learning thing. If you take a little risk and that seems to pay off, then you take a little more and a little more and a little more, and over time, and at some point you do begin to absorb it into your identity that I'm a good messenger. And that then is a kind of a way of being at work.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Because what you're saying, I'm picturing people listening saying, yeah, well, I'm not going to speak up. You haven't met my boss. But what you're saying is take it a bite size at a time. Just get in slowly develop the habit and get the feedback and grow as you keep trying it.
Yeah. And I think insofar as you're comfortable and that you are expressing not only your truth, but care for the other person, you begin to have I mean, that's my story. That's the kind of the gold in there, is being able to establish a connection because you look and feel trustworthy. There's no hidden agenda here.
Right.
I believe in you, and here's why I'm telling you this. And,
that's lovely.
And if it is built into your identity, then you're actually serving as a change agent and a model for other people.
Right. Include the person you're trying to get to be honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And others will see and hear about this. Oh, well, Dan spoke up. He didn't get, they didn't kill the messenger. And, that changed the way the meetings happen. And that's cool. There is nothing like a reward for speaking up, like seeing change happen.
Right. But what you're also emphasizing, which I just love, is that you can't expect immediate gratification. You don't go into it expecting the person's going to hear you and suddenly the world will open up and birds will start singing.
Yeah.
You have to be prepared for a slow progression of change.
That's right. And you have to be able to be as good a receiver as you are a sender in the process.
Yes.
You have to be available to the feedback that might come your way. So in the situation we were talking about earlier, if my coachee speaks up to his boss, he might learn something about why he hasn't been promoted.
Yes.
He risks that. And
Yes.
if he can't respond to that, if he can't welcome that information in, then it's a problem.
Well, this has been wonderful.
Great.
This has just been wonderful. So I'm trying to think. You have dropped so many great nuggets. I don't even know if I can summarize them all here without thinking about it. What would you say to someone who's listening to this and they're thinking of their boss or
another person
who's not giving them what they want?
Yeah.
What would you say to that person?
I would say this is about your choice and your growth. That the choice is really critical. And that the more that you hone in on this as a challenge that's been placed in your path, and you take it on as an opportunity to become who you are meant to be, you might find an amazing set of rewards on the other side. But will it be easy? No. Will it take some time and effort and thoughtfulness and self-knowledge and willingness to risk? Absolutely. But it's up to you. It's your choice.
That's perfect. So many people think the problem is there to be a problem. And you're saying the problem is there to be an opportunity for growth.
That's right. That's right. And we all need to grow. I mean, right now in this society, man, is there a need for growth? We are in such trouble, Jean. I mean, from my standpoint,
it is.
The cycles of mistrust here are just so enormous, some of which, replicate, go right back to that theme of oppression and authoritarianism. And, the language that some politicians are using scares the daylights out of me.
And it's accepted. It's accepted.
Exactly.
I was astonished to hear someone say, I think I'm starting to favor authoritarianism.
Oh.
Just some random person on the street who was being interviewed said, I think I'm starting to favor that.
No, you, yeah.
How malleable we are as human beings.
Oh, and in this country, which is so focused on individualism anyway, we don't seem to understand the power of social movements that have at their base targeting people and creating an enemy of some kind.
And creating conformity.
That's right. So we have a ton of work to do.
We have a ton of work to do, and I am so glad you're in the world doing it.
Thank you, Jean. It's been a real pleasure for me to talk with you, and I hope we can do it again.
Yes. How should people get in touch with you?
Well, probably the easiest way is via my website, which is danieloestreich.com.
Okay. And I'm going to put it in the show notes. Yeah. So it's not a Daniel C. It's just Daniel Oestreich.
Oestreich, yes, just Daniel Oestreich. So DANIELOESTREICH.
Okay, it's Daniel, not just
Daniel. Yeah, I'm not. Okay. It's not just Dan.
Okay.
And if you wanted to email me, it would be dan@danieloestreich.com, and I would welcome any inquiries. I'm happy to talk to anybody that wants to talk to me. So there you go.
Okay. Well, it's been a sheer delight. And it seems like we came through similar paths in terms of theory. I mean,
yes.
So, okay. Yes. So thank you kindly.
Thank you, Jean. Take care.
Dan gave us so many nuggets in this conversation. The first point is that we respect people's dignity when we respect their identity. Now, people trash identity, saying they create a lot of conflict, and they really do. I hadn't really thought about how so much conflict really boils down to a clash of identities. One person's identity conflicts with another person's identity. What that statement ignores is that claiming you don't care what ethnic group or color a person is, you may be violating something that's core to their sense of dignity as an individual and as a member of a group. Now, the second point was him saying that he preferred the term dignity over the term respect. I agree with that. As I think about it, the word dignity reflects something that's more core and central to a person than the word respect. The third takeaway was about driving out fear in the workplace. He and I both agree you cannot remove fear. What we can do is reduce mistrust. And the way to do that is to have the willingness and courage to bring up the very things that are generating mistrust. I'm aware this is more than a notion. It's scary to bring up stuff that's hard to talk about, the undiscussables. But if we surface the things that are hard to talk about, we grow as human beings. We become better people for having faced our fear and having taken a step to generate a stronger relationship. If we stay silent, we stifle our own selves and our potential for growth. That's all. Glad you joined us. I'm Jean Ladding of Leading Consciously. Our next book is coming out in July 2024. It's called Conscious Change: How to Navigate Differences and Foster Inclusion in Everyday Relationships. And if you're interested in any of our programs, go to leadingconsciously.com. You can learn more about Dan in the show notes below.